Tonight on Ukraine Today, hot headlines. An oil depot is on fire in Russia's Pskov region. A blackout hits part of Belgorod. Enemy targets are destroyed in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. Security Service Special Operation. Ukraine significantly disrupted the occupiers' coordination. Secret contacts. The National Public Broadcasting Company of Ukraine reports that after the main round of negotiations in Geneva, Ukrainian and Russian representatives held a separate meeting. Elections in Ukraine. What did President Zelenskyy advise Western partners who insist on holding a vote during the war? All that and more, right now. Hello, I'm Volodymyr Zelenskyy and this is Ukraine Today. Please subscribe, like this video, and let's get straight to the news. Let's begin with the hot updates. An oil depot caught fire in Russia's Pskov region. Russian Telegram channels claim it happened after a drone attack. A large-scale fire broke out at the site. And in part of the Russian city of Belgorod, the lights went out. Local authorities say this was the result of a drone strike. The governor of the Belgorod region reports damaged energy facilities. Who is behind the attack remains unclear. At least for now, Ukraine's military leadership has not commented on any involvement of the defense forces. But here, things are much clearer. Ukraine's defense forces struck a launcher of the S-300 air defense system, a drone workshop, and the concentrations of enemy personnel and equipment in the Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. This was reported by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In Russia's Kursk region, an enemy drone command post was also hit. Earlier, the Security Service of Ukraine carried out a special operation that significantly complicated the occupiers' coordination and destroyed part of their weapons stockpiles. More details on Ukrainian strikes in the report.
A brilliant operation by the SBU that deprived the occupiers of communication with their command. The strike hit secret facilities that are usually not so easy to reach.
In general, these places are very well hidden, securely concealed, and the issue of striking them is always very relevant.
We're talking about headquarters and command posts. Information about their locations is highly classified, and that's not surprising since the front line depends on their operation. But one careless action and the headquarters becomes exposed, and after that, it's just a matter of technique.
As a rule, they are detected either by some kind of equipment, like, I don't know, a satellite flies over and spots something suspicious, or by intercepting a careless conversation, for example, when a Russian soldier steps out to call his mother and says, "Mom, you can't imagine, they let me work at a secret headquarters somewhere in the Zaporizhzhia region." Intercepting a conversation is not difficult, nor is identifying the place, the location where he is speaking from.
Thanks to the Alpha Special Forces, 4 headquarters and command posts were blown up at once, and all of them were located behind enemy lines, that is, in places where the Russians felt securely hidden.
What's important is when the commanders from different directions gather there with their big maps. And of course, ideally, the generals would show up with those huge stripes on their pants, like a highway, right? And so once they go in there, that's when you hit them, of course.
We won't go into the details of these operations. It's enough to understand that this is very painstaking work, but the damage inflicted on the occupiers was worth it. Thanks to the destruction of such targets, the Russian invaders now face significant difficulties in commanding their units, supplying resources, and preparing new attacks. As part of the SBU operation, 3 locations where personnel were stationed, including FSB special forces, were also hit. In addition, Ukrainian specialists struck a drone manufacturing facility, 2 fuel and lubricant depots, 2 UAV launch sites, an ammunition depot, and a logistics hub. 4 command and observation posts and other military targets were also eliminated. FPV drones were used to strike these targets. According to the SBU press service, the UAVs were equipped with warheads weighing 105 kilograms, which ensured the high effectiveness of the operation. The SBU drones operate not only directly against Russian occupiers, but also against targets that support the front line. We are, of course, talking about the Russian military-industrial complex, and here too the Russians have suffered losses in recent days. UAVs paid a visit to the Metafrax chemicals plant in the Perm region. The distance to it is 1,600 kilometers, but that's no obstacle for the SBU when the goal is to undermine Russia's rear military industry. This particular facility is the largest producer of methanol in Russia. Its products are used to manufacture chemical components necessary for the production of explosives and other military-grade materials.
You can actually see that there is one.
This is now a strike on the Ukhta oil refinery. Here, the SBU set a new record. This oil refinery is located 1,750 kilometers from the border with Ukraine. The sabotage of oil facilities seems to be one of the security service drone's favorite targets. The night before, the SBU also struck the Tamaneftegaz oil terminal in the Krasnodar region.
They actually hit it with a fixed-wing type.
A drone!
A drone captured right here in real time.
Where is it?
There it is. Look out the window.
Tamaneftegaz is one of the largest Russian ports in the Black Sea region, handling the transshipment of oil, gas and ammonia. The previous successful strike carried out on this terminal back on January 22nd resulted in significant financial losses for Russia, totaling approximately $50 million. And this is only a small part of the work accomplished in a very short time that the security service has carried out to undermine Russia's military potential. And how much more is still ahead?
Over the past day, Russia lost at least 830 troops killed and wounded since the beginning of the full-scale invasion that brings the total to 1,256,910 occupiers. In the last 24 hours alone, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 1 Russian tank, 3 armored combat vehicles, 21 artillery systems and dozens of other pieces of enemy military equipment. We have covered the battlefield. Now, diplomacy. Suspilne, the national public broadcasting company of Ukraine, has learned that after the main round of talks in Geneva, representatives of Ukraine and Russia held a separate meeting. It lasted about 1.5 hours. The topics discussed remain unknown. Meanwhile, there is far more information about the main round of negotiations.
The negotiations in Geneva on February 17th through 18th differ from the previous meeting in Abu Dhabi. The point is that the parties work simultaneously in 2 directions, political and military. To do this, the delegation split into groups.
Ukraine is working constructively. The ultimate goal remains unchanged, a just and lasting peace.
However, according to The Economist, the Ukrainian delegation split not only for negotiations. Allegedly, there is no unified position within the team regarding the pace of a possible agreement.
One camp, led by former head of Ukrainian intelligence Kyrylo Budanov, believes it is better to quickly agree to the terms of US President Donald Trump and put an end to the military actions. At the same time, another group within the delegation, headed by Andriy Yermak, is not particularly interested in signing an agreement. According to journalists, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is trying to balance between these 2 approaches, while at the same time having his own vision of the negotiation process.
We don't know what the journalists are basing this on, but it looks like a distortion. It is actually Russia that does not want to shift the focus away from the main issue, peace. However, according to experts, what The Economist wrote about may be a planned tactic by the Ukrainian delegation.
The interpretation that there is something dividing us is clearly untrue, because it is obvious that the only condition for a quick deal, the abandonment by Ukraine of the non-occupied by Russia territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, which frankly everyone understands perfectly well, will not lead to peace. Russia has not changed any other conditions, including for a ceasefire, and this will only make the situation worse. And it's absolutely clear that Budanov understands this. Perhaps, yes, there might be some disagreements there. Disagreements over tactics. There could also be another aspect. There is the good cop, bad cop tactic.
But let's get back to the negotiations themselves. Perhaps the most important update concerns the Europeans. Representatives of European countries did not participate in the trilateral negotiations. However, as the Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, Rustem Umerov, said, there was a separate meeting with the Ukrainian and American delegations.
I concluded a separate meeting with representatives of the US and European partners, France, the United Kingdom, Germany, Italy, and Switzerland. We discussed the results of today's round of negotiations and synchronized our approaches to further steps.
Of course, Russia was against involving Europe, but the European delegation still arrived in Geneva.
Ukraine, represented by Zelensky, has repeatedly stated that Europe must take part in these negotiations. And this is absolutely and completely logical. Since Russia's ongoing brutal war against Ukraine, with its very open and direct threats to the whole of Europe, is in fact a truly enormous and existential danger for all European countries today. And naturally, the important questions of how to end the war and the specific conditions under which it will finally come to a close are truly a matter of vital and pressing necessity for Europeans.
But let's return to the content of the negotiations. At the end of the first round of the Geneva meeting, Barak Ravid, a journalist from Axios, wrote that the political negotiations had reached a deadlock. And it was all because of Vladimir Medinsky. Yes, Putin once again sent this pseudo-historian to the negotiations. What's interesting is that even Kremlin propagandists are trolling Medinsky's Rurik lecture.
What issues should be raised?
Security, territory, dual.
Gifts. Were there at least any ugly stories, tell me?
Axios, citing Volodymyr Zelenskyy, wrote that Ukraine is concerned about Medinsky's participation in the negotiations, and this concern is not unfounded.
Medinsky likes to philosophize about the historical roots of the war. We don't have time for all that, so we need to make decisions and end the war.
Medinsky's participation is a direct sign that Russia is sabotaging the negotiations. The Washington Post is also writing about this.
The return of Vladimir Medinsky, an aide to President Vladimir Putin, who previously questioned Ukraine's sovereignty, to head the Russian delegation at the negotiations in Geneva, is a sign that Moscow intends to insist on its tough political demands on Ukraine aimed at removing Zelensky from power and undermining Ukrainian statehood.
The Kremlin, for its part, insists that Medinsky has always been the head of their delegation and that he was absent from the previous negotiations because issues were being discussed in which he is not competent.
Why didn't he participate in the previous two rounds? Because those were about security issues, matters that directly concern the military. That's why our group was led by Kostyukov there. The group consisted of military personnel.
But no matter how the Kremlin tries to explain it, Medinsky is a very clear signal about Russia's peaceful intentions, or rather, the lack thereof.
Broadly speaking, the specific fact that the government in Moscow once again chose to appoint Vladimir Medinsky as the lead head of the negotiating delegation served as undeniable evidence and a remarkably strong signal to the world that there was absolutely not even a slight desire or sincere intention on their part to negotiate anything of substance at all.
As for the negotiations of the military group, according to Axios, there is progress. According to the president of Ukraine, the discussion was about a mechanism for monitoring the ceasefire.
The military understands how to monitor a ceasefire and the end of the war, if there is political will. They have agreed on almost everything there. The monitoring will definitely involve the American side.
And a few more words about the first day of negotiations. In the Russian Federation, the meeting was described as tense. The negotiations lasted about 6 hours, all behind closed doors. Vladimir Zelenskyy also speaks of a difficult meeting.
Yesterday there really were difficult meetings, and we can state that Russia is trying to drag out the negotiations, which could already have reached the final stage.
In addition, as Axios reports citing Zelenskyy, the president of Ukraine instructed the delegation to also raise the issue of a personal meeting with Putin. According to him, this is the best way to achieve a breakthrough on territorial issues within the negotiations.
Ukraine once again continues to demonstrate its unwavering willingness for substantive and meaningful negotiations at the highest level directly. But unfortunately, there will be no such meeting taking place at this time. Well, Putin, to put it mildly, he's not exactly brave. The Russians are doing everything they can to avoid this meeting. We saw how disgracefully he was just running away, Putin, from the meeting in Turkey.
The issue of Russian strikes on Ukraine, of course, is also on the table.
The guys definitely need to raise the question about these strikes, the question, first and foremost, to the American side, which had suggested to both us and Russia to refrain from strikes. Ukraine is ready. We do not need war. And we always act in a mirrored way. We are defending our state.
On February 18th, the negotiations lasted only 2 hours. According to the head of the Russian delegation, Medinsky, everything is complicated.
You know, the negotiations went on for 2 days. Yesterday was very long, in different formats. And then again today, for about 2 hours. They were challenging, but businesslike.
By the way, as expected, there is no progress on the issues of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and the territory. But the next trilateral meeting is scheduled for the near future.
Ukraine is fighting for freedom. Support independent Ukrainian journalism so we can keep telling the truth about Russia's war. Click the link in the description to become a sponsor. Now's the perfect moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video and share it. Please do it. Thank you, and glory to Ukraine. At least a 2-month ceasefire, according to Volodymyr Zelenskyy, would be enough to hold presidential elections in Ukraine. He said this in an interview with British journalist Piers Morgan. Zelenskyy added that Western partners who insist on elections should decide what they really want: elections themselves or simply a different president. By the way, just yesterday, Associated Press published an interview with former Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny. In my view, this could be seen as the beginning of his election campaign. Indirectly, this may suggest that elections in Ukraine could take place already this year. Otherwise, an early start might cost Zaluzhny political points. And finally, how the Kremlin is trying to deceive the White House. Moscow is offering Washington what it calls a great deal, one that could supposedly bring both countries enormous profits and even help Donald Trump secure a Nobel Prize. The man expected to deliver this proposal is Kirill Dmitriev, a longtime acquaintance of US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. What is really behind this deal, and will Vladimir Putin and his circle succeed in their plan? More on that next.
The Kremlin has offered the White House the greatest economic deal, which could potentially bring not only unimaginable wealth but also the coveted Nobel Prize, reports The Economist. It seems that this is the answer to the question, why? All this time, Donald Trump has refused to stop the aggressor and is literally blackmailing the victim, forcing them to accept capitulation.
It would be better for Ukraine to sit down at the negotiating table as soon as possible. That's all I can say. We are in such a position that we want them to come.
The cunning former KGB agent quickly figured out the main weakness of the ex-businessman and has already flown to Alaska with a $12 trillion offer. That's 6 annual budgets of Samoiler. The Russians offered the Americans oil and gas extraction in the Arctic, the development of rare earth metals, the creation of a data processing center with nuclear energy savings, and the construction of a tunnel under the Bering Strait. According to journalists, Putin even promised to return $5 billion worth of confiscated assets belonging to the oil company ExxonMobil.
To take Putin at his word? I don't know how naive a person would have to be. Putin responsibility and Putin and promises, these are entirely unrelated and incompatible concepts that simply do not go together.
The entire negotiation track is overseen by Kirill Dmitriev. Since April of last year, he has met with Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff about a dozen times. Dmitriev not only flew across the ocean himself, but also kept Steve, and later Steve and Trump's son-in-law, circling around. He hosted Jared in Moscow, treated him to Chebureki, and showed him Red Square. And following the old Golden Horde tradition, he sent care packages across the ocean.
Witkoff handed Trump a box. Red caviar from the Khabarovsk region, according to the Regional Ministry of Industry and Trade. Witkoff tried the red caviar during lunch at a Moscow restaurant. He was so impressed by it that the special envoy was presented with an entire box of caviar.
You can see just how close Russians and Americans have become over the past year from this video. Putin's microphone number 1. Propagandist Zarubin made an exclusive report from the latest meeting between Witkoff, Kushner and Putin. Here's how the Americans behaved while waiting for the dictator.
Before the meeting with Putin begins, people here are talking without an interpreter. On Trump's son-in-law's wrist, is a red string. Some believe that such bracelets help with health and bring good luck, but he also has a ring on his finger. Josh Greenbaum has the same ring. And these are clearly smart rings, meaning they measure stress levels, heart rate, and sleep phases. At that moment, they were clearly not under any particular stress. Smiles. Pats on the shoulder. And even jokes.
Even Putin's interpreter received compliments from the Americans.
Steve Witkoff suddenly says,
all these trips and sweet smiles are for the sake of a big deal. According to The Economist, all last summer, a huge number of lawyers across the ocean worked overtime to analyze possible scenarios for lifting sanctions on Russia. And after 2022, we're talking about 23,000 financial restrictions. American businesses hope to capture the Russian market, where Europeans were the leaders before the invasion and are also eager to gain access to frozen assets. But the main thing that inspires Trump's envoys is the potential stakes in mega projects capable of changing global commodity markets.
Most Russian oil fields are old and significantly depleted. To maintain production, the country needs large-scale infusions of foreign technology, workforce and capital. This could contribute to a shale revolution in Western Siberia, where, according to Artyom Abramov from the consulting company Restat Energy, there may be about 12 billion barrels of recoverable oil and gas reserves. This is roughly equivalent to 7 years of oil production in the Permian Basin, the main shale region of the United States of America.
Putin is betting on the greed of his overseas counterpart. And so far, it's working. Businessmen who have temporarily found themselves in the seats of world powers leaders are losing their heads over imaginary riches.
That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your support. Strength to Ukraine's defenders. Glory to Ukraine. Like, subscribe, comment, share. And see you next time.